Privatisation has failed. The neoliberal experiment started by Margaret Thatcher has been a disaster. Its only legacy is unaffordable bills, rising energy prices and sewage in our waterways. There is a better way. It's democratic public ownership. Under the Tories, we're living through a crisis of privatisation, a crisis where water companies pay out billions in dividends whilst polluting our rivers with sewage and hiking our bills, a crisis where energy companies profiteer while bills soar and millions struggle to make ends meet, a crisis where our trains don't run on time and our railway workers are failed and threatened with the sack while shareholders prosper, and where posties suffer while the privatised Royal Mail just gets worse and worse. It's time for public ownership. The next Labour government needs to introduce it so we can cut bills for millions of people struggling to make ends meet, so we can end the shareholder rip-off, and so we can plan a green transition which tackles climate change in a way that benefits working class people. As you know, the arguments against it just don't stack up. They say it'll turn off voters, but every poll shows massive support for public ownership. The proposals developed by Becky Long-Bailey in 2019 put workers and communities at the centre of a new system with democratic accountability at its heart. In place of a failed market approach and profiteers, we can pursue a new participatory approach to public ownership, one which maximises worker and citizen control throughout the system. But they say it's too expensive, but the reality is it pays for itself. And the reality is also we're having to pay right now to clear up the private sector's mess. Public ownership of water will save $2.5 billion a year. Investing this will reduce leakage levels by a third. And public ownership of rail will save $1 billion a year, enough to buy 100 miles of new railway track. The case for public ownership is impossible to ignore. For too long, private companies have profiteered off vital public infrastructure, and it's time to end that profiteering. It's time for public ownership.